We are in the middle of the 7th chapter. Now, we've been saying that for a while now, because as I mentioned last time, I believe the 7th chapter is the longest chapter in the book. I would have to look that up just to make sure I'm correct, but whether or not, it's definitely the longest chapter we've encountered so far. And it's long, and it goes a lot of different directions. What we've seen so far is that he seems to be starting this discussion of how to get along with other people and how to navigate relationships with other people. That seems to be where he's going with the second half of the book. You know, what steps we have to take in dealing with other people. And he started with a little bit of an introduction, which was a little here, there, and everywhere. You know, he kind of gave us some how would I put this? Kind of give us a Cliff's Notes version, you know, to start us off, just a couple different ideas. But now he's been kind of settled on a topic now for a couple sentences so far. So we're going to continue with that this week. What we started with was, let me see. Well, you know what? Let's go jump into the screen share so we can kind of see the series of verses all together. Okay, and there's that. I'll just take 1 second here to get my screen set up. I have the letters, I think, as big as they go. So you know what? Let's see. Maybe we can make it just a little bit bigger. Oh, we could. There you go. All right. Now they should be nice and big. Okay. And the first thing we saw was actually this verse Yud, verse 10 over here, where he said, "Don't say that the earlier days were better, or don't ask why the earlier days were better, because that's not a question that you ask out of wisdom." Okay. And we said that, you know, you don't want to get stuck looking at the past and saying, "I wish I was there." You know. Then we had verse number 11, and we said that nevertheless, even though you don't want to just get stuck in the past and try to relive old experiences or old previous times in history or in your own life, etc., he did say that this verse 11, which we got to last week, he says, or again, not last week, it was 2 weeks ago. We didn't have class last week. But he said over here that wisdom is better with a larger worldview, a view of history. So basically, you end up with two ideas. Number one is that you want to keep a focus on what happened in the past. You want to let the past inform your decision-making process now. At the same time, you don't want to get stuck in the past. You don't want to just repeat patterns that you've had in the past. You want to learn from it, but also move it forward. So you want to kind of find this balance between I'm going to use the word conservative point of view, not conservative as in capital C conservative, but lowercase c conservative point of view. You want to have this view where you take account and you honor what happened in the past, I would say, and at the same time use it to inform your future, to work to progress into the future. So kind of strike that balance between, let's just say, conservatism and progressivism. Okay. Again, those are definitely heavily weighted terms. So I don't want you to get the wrong sense that I'm saying or that we should follow one or the other of those systems. I'm just saying that a wisdom path would find probably the balance between those two things. And in the discussion of history, he said you want to really figure out a way to really understand history for what it really was. When you look at the past, you want to see what history really was. And so that was verse number 12, where he says that you have to understand, you have to be cognizant of the fact that history when a person is taught history, when a person is really taught any type of wisdom, it's going to be weighted in someone's direction. And usually that's in the direction of money, right? Interested parties will often change the written wisdom or the accepted wisdom, okay? And that's just a reality, right? To simply put, you could say that history is written by the victors, right? So, you know, it's when we are researching something that happened in the past, or when we're researching wisdom in general, we want to be cognizant of the fact that we may have a skewed point of view because somebody's fed us that point of view. And that's something we want to be careful about, as opposed to true wisdom, where you're fully cognizant of everything and you come to what's the fullest and truest wisdom. That's going to be something that's fulfilling. It's going to be, as we said over here at the end of verse 12, techaya va'aleha is something that gives life to its owners, right? And so the question that we face is obviously, where do you find true wisdom? How do we, as individuals, approach and even begin to think that we can access true wisdom? Where are we going to find it? If every piece of information that you're being fed is quite literally being fed to you, it's influenced by some sort of interested party. So then how are you going to find true wisdom? Where are you going to see that? And so we saw this verse again at the end of the last class, but I wanted to start over from here again, just because we kind of rushed through it at the end of the class. So let's see it again. This is verse number 13. It says, where are you going to find wisdom? Where will we, as people who are definitely completely influenced by the world around us, where are we going to find wisdom in its purest sense? And to that, he has a 4-word answer, a very simple answer. Re'eh et ma'aseh ha'elokim. Look at the acts of God. Okay, so we actually said last time that there's really two ways to look at that. There's obviously the way that I would imagine King Solomon would want it to be understood, which is that you should look at the Torah, right? So we have the Hashem, God gave us a manual, a rule book, some sort of thing to follow and to find wisdom. If we believe that God is the creator of the world, then at the same time, he gave us a manual for this amazing tool, right? So we have a world that surrounds us. And if we want to find wisdom, we'll find it in the acts of God. We'll find it in those things, in the words that God presented to us. That's actually, personally, that's something that I always find comforting. It's something that I find true, is that if we want to find, is that when we look at the Torah, it's beneficial for us to look at it as a manual for the world. Right? We're often stuck with questions where we may not know what the answer is. What's right and what's wrong, what's moral, what's immoral, what's amoral, what's, what, all those sorts of things. So when you look at the world, you could have so many different ideas thrown at you about what's correct or incorrect. But what King Solomon's telling us is, and as you would expect the king of the Jewish people to tell you, is he says, look at the Torah, look at the book that the Creator gave us to guide us in this world. I did offer that there is another way of understanding that, perhaps. He does not actually say, look at the book of God. He doesn't say, look at the words of God. He actually says, look at the actions of God. Look at ma'aseh ha'elokim. Okay? And in fact, it's interesting because we're right in the middle of this high holiday season. And there's a poem that we read. I believe it's only read on Yom Kippur. I don't think it's on Rosh Hashanah. I think I got that right. But it's a poem called Ma'aseh Ha'elokim, the acts of God. And it's kind of glorifying how the angels glorify God and how mankind glorifies God altogether. And this beautiful poem about how we glorify God for his actions, okay, whatever that means. But in another sense, the way we look at that is Ma'aseh Elokim is places where you could see what God has done. So kind of to look at it like this, where there's some sciences or some disciplines are subject to human influence, right? You can't, as I mentioned, history is a great example. History is definitely skewed in one party's favor or another, or multiple parties' favors, right? It's naturally going to have a certain level of subjectivity to it, right? In fact, I read, what was it? I believe it's Norman Cantor, who was a historian from the 60s. He has a great book called Medieval History, and he writes in his intro that it's important to understand that history is essentially subjective. It's not objective. As much as we like to believe it's objective, it's actually subjective. And he goes to explain why that is, because it's influenced by whichever parties write it, whichever parties record it, etc. So there are some disciplines where you won't have that. It won't be subject to subjectivity. They are inherently objective. And so that's where we would say, if you want to find true wisdom that's not going to be affected by humans, look for those things that we would deem as ma'aseh elokim, the acts of God. I would think of that more as kind of the physics, the the science, math, etc. Now, obviously, those can be potentially subject to some sort of human influence, but they are definitely in certain instances. But I do believe that those are kind of what another idea that he's coming to tell us is if you want to find wisdom, you can focus on those disciplines and you'll find something that's not going to be at all, or at least not as much, affected by humans. And why is it important to avoid that human interaction, that human taint, if you will? And that's the second half of the verse over here. So I'm sorry, I broke the verse up. We usually read the verse all at once. So let me do that from the top. This is verse 13. Look at the acts of God. Because who is able to fix et asher ivato, that which he has bent, or which the person has bent. Okay. Now, when I first read this, I thought, who is able to fix that which God has bent? It does not seem to be that's the case. A lot of the commentaries, none of the commentaries seem to indicate that. So it's not that which God has bent. It's who's able to fix that which they themselves have bent. Okay. So let's see that again. Look at the acts of God. Because who is able litakein, to fix et asher ivato, that which they have bent. Okay, meaning to say that certain things, certain sciences, certain disciplines are going to be bent by that human touch, and who is going to be able to fix those things? So again, miyuchal, who is able to fix et asher ivato, that which the human interaction has caused to be bent. Okay, we've had this word before, way back in the second chapter, second chapter. We said uvat lo yichal kon, that something that is bent is unable to be fixed, right? Uvat. So that's that same word over here, ivato. I'm not exactly sure what the Hebrew root there is. It sounds like it says aleph vav tet, taf. I'm sorry, aleph vav taf. But I would have to look that up to make sure that that's the actual Hebrew root. But whatever it is, the idea there is that it's something that's bent. So who is able to fix that which we have bent? Okay, meaning in other words, you want to, if you're just going to be relying on what's accepted as wisdom in the time that you're living, right? You just accept what's the general accepted wisdom, and you say that's what people think. That's probably true. So first of all, realize that there's a lot of interested parties that are probably getting you to that point, that are messing with your objectiveness, and at the same time, there are also parties, or the same parties, that are bending those things, and it's going to be nearly impossible to straighten them out. To straighten them out. So instead, where will we find wisdom? You'll find it when you look at Maaseh Elokim, the acts of God. Okay. Now, we have done this verse already, so I don't want to spend too much time on it. And for that, let's move on to the next verse. Okay. So that was verse 13. Ooh, can I get all of it on this page? Let me lower the size just a little bit. It's a longer verse. There we go. Sorry, now I lost it. Here we go. Yeah, it's a long verse, so I'm sorry if you got used to the larger size, but yeah, we have to bring it back over here. And this is a very, very famous verse. At least part of this verse is very famous. So let's take it piece by piece. Again, it's a longer piece, so let me highlight it so we can see see where we're looking. Okay, and it says like this. No, let me just take a drink first. Okay. It says over here like this: B'yom tova, on a good day, hayeh v'tov, then you should be with the good. That's a seemingly simple thing, but we'll see that it's not as simple as you think. Uvyom ra'ah, and on a bad day, re'eh, look. Okay, I believe we have a little bit of a play on words over there. This is uvyom ra'ah re'eh, right? On a bad day, look. Okay. Gam et zeh l'umat zeh, also this, et zeh, this, l'umat zeh, versus this, asaha Elokim, God has created. God has made. Al divrat, in order, is probably the best way to explain that. In order, shlo yimtza ha'adam acharav me'uma. In order so that humankind will not find after him anything. Okay, so a lot of different pieces over there. We're gonna have to unpack that piece by piece. Let's just go through the verse all together as one more time. B'yom tova hayevitov. On a good day, be with the good. Uvyom ra'ah, and on a bad day, re'eh, watch or see. Gam et zeh l'umat zeh, both this versus this, asaha Elokim, God has created. Al divrat, in order, or with the intention, shleimtza ha'adam acharav me'uma, that man will not find after him, or will not notice after him anything. Okay, so we have to, again, obviously we have to address a number of things. Number one is, what's the good day? What's the bad day? What is it? Why is it on a good day be good, but on a bad day watch? What is this versus this God created? And what does it mean that man will not find after him or after them anything? Who is the them and that we're talking about? So a lot of pieces to unpack over here. All right, let's just start from the beginning. And it says, B'yom tova hayevitov. On a good day, a person should be good. And again, as I said before, that is seemingly an obvious statement. What else would I be on a good day? But I think it's actually a lot deeper than that, especially when we contrast it with what we're told to do with Yom Ra'ah Re'eh, that on a bad day, a person should watch. You might think, well, let's take it like this. The way I perceive this good day, what's a day that is good? And we actually find this a lot in the commentaries, that this idea is expressed, that a good day would be a time when things are going well, let's say for the Jewish people, okay? So when you look at it like this, we have things that we're supposed to do in this world, okay? We have mitzvot that we're supposed to do, right? Good deeds that God has told us to do. So I would say that a good day would be a day that, or a period of time where we're able to do those things that we're expected to do. Kind of the way I'm looking at it is that there's different times in history. There's times in history when we are blessed with the opportunity to live free lives, to make our choices for ourselves, to live in an experience that we can do kind of what we perceive to be the right thing. Okay, so for example, nowadays would be a perfect example of that, right? Of that, although yes, there are some that we do face issues of anti-Semitism and things like that, but in general, we have a freedom that we're able to enjoy and do something with. So the lesson over here would be, don't squander that opportunity. When you are given an opportunity to do good, all right? So if your perception of doing good is to follow the mitzvot of the Torah, so then thank God we live in a time where that's a easy thing, relatively easy thing to do, right? We're able to fast on Yom Kippur. We're able to shake a lulav and etrog on Sukkot. We're able to build a sukkah. We're able to blow a shofar on Rosh Hashanah. Right? We're able to do all these things. So don't squander that opportunity when it's available to you. Okay. What about when it's not available to you? When a person does not have that opportunity, which we've seen not so long ago, or throughout probably most of our history in the exile, is that we have found times where we are under some sort of duress, where we have some sort of oppression upon us. Just taking the example of the shaking the lulav on Sukkot, we don't even have to look as far as the Holocaust. There were many times throughout history where to get a etrog was nearly impossible. Okay, there were cities that would, if they would be lucky enough to get one year, they'd figure out ways to preserve it from year to year so that they could use it again next year. And preserving a fruit and keeping it fresh, you can't dry out the fruit like a dried apricot. It has to be still moist. So they figured out how to vacuum pack it. And we're talking 150, 200 years ago. they'd figure out how to vacuum pack the edge road so that a year later they could pull it out again and use it for another year, because it was very difficult to do that. So that would be, into a certain degree, what we call Yom Ra'ah. It's a bad day. Okay, so that's kind of on a spiritual level. And on a spiritual level, we're told that there's good days. When you have good days, when you live in times when things are available to you, don't squander that opportunity, right? We live in a time nowadays where the Jewish community as a whole is very active, proactive, right? There's, thank God, there's people with money, there's people with the ability to do kindness, right? Who's always the first one to, in Haiti or with Hurricane Ian or anything like that, who's the first group to go and send money? It's always us, because thank God we live in a time with Yom Tovah, it's a good day. So he says, when you live in a good day, do good. Okay, don't squander that opportunity. But what happens when you live in a time when it's Yom Ra'ah, when it's not a good time? So is he telling you don't do good? He doesn't say that. He doesn't say don't do good. Neither does he say do bad. Or he doesn't say, when things fall apart, you know what, it's Mad Max. Just the whole world is upside down. Just go for it. He doesn't say that either. He says Re'eh. What he says is watch. Okay. I mean, sometimes you do have to take a back seat and kind of watch what's going on around you. And obviously, you're waiting for a better time when you're able to do more. But what your job is at that time is just to watch. Some of the commentaries express this as watch and see what happens. Watch and see what God intends to happen to come out of these days. That's one way of looking at it. If you want to take Kohelet into a darker path, which we try to avoid generally, but he says some commentaries express watch the punishment that comes to wicked people. I don't feel so comfortable with that explanation, but okay, whatever it is, he says that your job at that point is to sit back and to watch, to take a less active, less proactive place in the world, and instead to kind of hold on to what's yours for a better time, and see what you can learn out of this current situation, right? There's plenty of things that we did learn from going through the Holocaust. Not that we would ask for it again. We're very happy with what we have right now, but there were lessons that we learned. There's things that we gained through the hardships of that. Right. So our job again is to, when going through a bad time, is re'eh, to stop and watch. Okay. So that's on kind of a spiritual level. But to tie that back into where we're talking, which is in our relationships with other people, and in regards to wisdom, how we use our wisdom. The way I was kind of thinking about this was that when we are trying to make a relationship with other people, so there's times when we have the opportunity to do things. Again, it's a direct correlation to what we said, but just expressing it in a different way. You have certain times when times are good and people around you are open to hearing what you have to say. So in that case, if you're a wise person, then you're going to take that opportunity and use it. Right? If people want to hear what you have to say, if times are good, then use that opportunity. But at the same time, let's say times are bad. Let's say you're living at a time when wisdom is not appreciated, when nobody wants to hear what you say, even though what you're saying is the truth, even though what you're saying is objective fact. Then you know what? You also have to kind of take that moment and say, all right, I'm going to take a little bit of a back seat for this time and stop and watch what happens. Because I think there's a point that he's getting to over here, is that a wise person not only knows what to say and what to say when they're given the podium, but a wise person also knows how to not say what's not going to be listened to. In fact, the rabbis tell us, not regarding to this, not directly related to this verse, but the rabbis do tell us that just like it is a mitzvah, just like you get points, so to speak, for saying something that will be heard by people, you also get a mitzvah for not saying something that won't be heard, that won't be listened to, right? A wise person knows not only when to open their mouth, but also when to shut their mouth and open their eyes instead. As we're saying over here, to open your eyes instead. And so again, we're talking about the person's a wise person. They're trying to make a relationship with other people. They're trying to share their gifts with the rest of the world. So not only should they know what to say when times are good, when it's good for them to do so, but when it's not good for them to do so, then they shut their mouth and they open their eyes. Biyom ra'ah, on a bad day, ra'eh. You just watch instead. Okay. With that, he shifts into this next part of the word next part of the verse over here. He says, Gam et zeh lumat zeh asah Elokim. Also, this versus this God has created. This is a very common phrase that we find throughout the teachings of the rabbis, and it's often used to express a very Jewish idea. One of the ideas that's very, actually, I would say, central to Judaism is that we believe in one source of everything, right? So one God, that one God who does what we perceive to be good and what we perceive to be bad, right? That's a Jewish concept. We don't have a theology that depicts a God versus a devil or anything like that. In our world, it's God is the source of everything. In fact, the rabbis tell us that when a person prays in the morning, they should mention the evening. And when a person prays in the evening, they should mention the morning, to show that our belief is that the same God created light and created darkness, created day and created night. Okay, which is, again, that's counter to a very pagan belief that other religions perhaps can't fathom that one source could be both the source of good and evil. And our religion, that's central to us. So when we say Gamet Zelu Madzel Selukim, we say that both this and that are created by God. So that's that good day and that bad day. So again, on that kind of cultural, spiritual level, there's that the time is when things are good for the Jewish people, and we're being told to be proactive and do what's good. So yeah, that obviously comes from God, right? God's giving us the go ahead. But there's also those times when we're being told to stay silent, to watch as something unfolds, and that also is created by God, right? That's to a certain degree, that's something that we can relate to, because having just gone through, or hopefully finishing up, the COVID experience, we got a chance to look back and say, okay, this was an act of God, and we're supposed to learn something from this. We're supposed to take what happened to us, and apply lessons to our own lives. Right? Again, that's if you live with a kind of a godly perspective, that's part of what we're supposed to do, is figure out what we're supposed to take away from something, because both this and that are created by God. This versus that are created by God. They're both here for our benefit and for our betterment, I would say. And again, how do we do that? On good days, we're proactive. On bad days, we're less active, but we're living with our eyes open. And again, also in our personal relationships, right? When people are listening to us, we're able to express the things we want to say. That's a gift from God. But sometimes we don't find that. We don't find that opportunity to go ahead and teach or share what we want with other people. We don't have that opportunity to be proactive. And instead, we got a chance to close our mouth and open our eyes and watch. And he adds on this last piece over here, which is very interesting. It says, al divrat, which again, the commentaries kind of struggle with al divrat. It would literally translate to on the words of, but that doesn't make sense in the context. Davar would mean a word. Instead, it's actually a common phrase in Talmudic terminology, al davar, on the matter of, or in regards to, or in this case, the way we would express this is in order so that that man does not find anything after him. Okay, the understanding of this would be, again, this is how a lot of the commentaries understand what we're saying over here, is when you live with an outlook that both things come from God, those up days and those down days. When you live with that experience, so then you start to see the hand of God in multiple places. You start to see where those, and if you're lucky enough to watch the series of events unfold all the way, then you get to see how from the beginning to the end it was for a general betterment, personal, cultural, etc. Again, sometimes that takes a very long view. Sometimes you have to wait a long time to see it all work out. But if you live with that understanding and you say, yes, both things come from God, so eventually or hopefully a person would get to a point where they are not left with complaints to God afterwards. Now, complaints to God is a very difficult thing to deal with, and so I don't know if I have the wherewithal to answer questions on that. So I'm going to hold off a little bit on that. Complaints to God it's one of the biggest questions that we face. Is can we or do we complain to God? How do we accept that which God has given us when we don't see the goodness in it? Again, so I don't think I have the qualifications to really get into a discussion of that. But he does throw it in here. He does say that when we live with that perspective of this and that God create, it builds in your mind an ability to understand a little bit more about what God's doing and to put aside some of the questions, I would say, right? So that the way he puts it is, a person will not find after him, will not find any complaints after God. They won't have any complaints following God. Again, perhaps it takes wisdom that I don't have, I don't know. But there's definitely what to discuss there. I just don't know if I have the ability to do so. Okay, so this general verse altogether, verse 14, it's multi-layered, but what it's saying at least what it seems to be saying is that there's two basic paradigms of connection that a person has, whether that's connection with God or connection with people, is that a person has there's one way where things are going well. There's good days, as he puts it. Those good days where we're told to be proactive, we're told to, this is the time to take the opportunities and use them. Then there's the bad days. And the natural reaction of a person would be to say, it's not fair. Like, I wanted to do this thing. Especially if we look at it with, talking about mitzvot or something like that. I wanted to shake a lulav, right? But there's no etrogim, there's no lulavim around, right? So it's not fair. Why didn't God give me the opportunity to do that if he wants me to do that? And so the answer, at least in a certain degree way, is he didn't want you to do that. He gave you the commandment, perhaps, but he didn't give you the opportunity to do it. So you know what? Don't complain about it. You're now given a different type of opportunity, a chance to watch instead of do, and that's kind of a different experience. We have this a lot actually with tomorrow night being Yom Kippur. This comes up a lot with people who don't have the opportunity to fast, right? Either they're sick, or they're not healthy enough, or they're some women who just gave birth or are pregnant or anything like that. They don't have the opportunity to fast, and for somebody who's fasted their entire life, it's like jarring, right? I want to fast, right? That's what I do on Yom Kippur, and then suddenly you're being told you're not allowed to fast. You're not supposed to fast, and it's very difficult for a person to do. My father once had that. He once had some pill that he had to take, and he had to take with a full meal. He couldn't take it with like little sips of water or anything like that. So he asked his rabbi, and the rabbi said, you got to eat. You have to eat a full meal. And he said it was the weirdest experience in his life. Just eating on Yom Kippur and doing it because that's what God wants him to do. And because we have this sense of what God wants us to do. But sometimes it's really more, sometimes what God really wants us to do is not what we think he wants us to do, if that makes sense. So every once in a while you're faced with these places where instead of doing the good, right, tov, that good that we assume, sometimes what we're supposed to do is just to sit and watch. Okay, you know what? I have a different experience right now, but I'm going to watch it and kind of watch it through and see what am I supposed to learn from this situation. So again, I think that's kind of the lesson over here from this verse, is that there's multiple parts of it. There's multiple parts of what we're trying to do, and there's multiple. What I'm trying to say is there's different things that are correct. Sometimes it's proactive action, but sometimes it's sitting back and watching instead. So again, I think that's the lesson from this verse over here. Okay. With that, let's move on to verse 15. We don't have that much time left, but we should be able to get through verse 15. Let me just raise the size again. Okay. Okay. There we go. Verse 15. And he says like this: Et hakol ra'iti b'mei all that I have seen in the days of my hevel. Okay, we've discussed hevel many times, right? The days of my steen, right? So we'll just leave it at that. Simply translated, most people will translate it as the days of my uselessness or my frivolity or futility, right? So all that I've seen everything basically. Yesh tzaddik oved b'tzidko. There are righteous people who get lost in their righteousness. V'yesh rasha ma'arich barato, and there are the wicked who continue in their wickedness. Okay, so let me read that again. Et hakol ra'iti b'mei hevli. I have seen everything in my days of Hevel. Yesh tzaddik oved b'tzidko. There is a tzaddik, there is a righteous person who has been lost in their righteousness. V'yesh rasha, there's also the wicked person, ma'arich barato, who has continued or extended into their wickedness, their evilness. Okay, and this here is an interesting verse. Why he starts off with this statement that I've seen everything in my life, I don't necessarily know why he starts off with that. I guess he just wants to, as he often does. I think he wants to kind of reintroduce or re-express his qualifications over here. Is that I've seen all these things. This is, I guess you could say, it's not hearsay. It's not a theory necessarily. He says, I've seen this with actual fact. I've seen this actually happen in action, which is a righteous person who gets lost in their righteousness and a wicked person who gets to continue in their wickedness. Okay, so again, depends on how you want to look at the book of Kohelet. If you want to look at it as kind of a downer of a book, so yeah, this is a really downer verse. It says you can be righteous, but you still get lost in the righteousness. Even with your righteousness, you lose out. And even a wicked person, he gets to keep on going with the rest of his life. That's a pretty dark take on it. I think there's something else that we're trying to say over here, really, which is that, as we said, there's a time, a wise person knows when to hold back from sharing what they need to share, from expressing their views on something. When they realize that it's a yom ra'ah for them, when they realize it's a bad day for them, they know how to hold back, instead take that back seat, that looking seat, instead of the speaking seat. And I think that's kind of what he's trying to express over here, is that he's seen, unfortunately, tzaddik. He doesn't say chacham over here, and he doesn't say kasil as a fool. He says tzaddik and rasha, righteous and wicked. He says a righteous person. That means that they're righteous, but he doesn't say that they're wise. This righteous person who's righteous, he's on a crusade, expressing his, what's good and right in the world. But you know what? Sometimes it's the wrong time to do that, and the righteous person, because of their righteousness, gets lost. Okay, their cause gets lost because they don't know when it's the right moment to open or close their mouth. And on the converse, you have a wicked person, again, who's not referred to as a fool over here like they usually are. Here it's a wicked person who's able to take the ra'ah, who's able to take that bad moment and stretch it out and use it to their advantage. Ma'arich, the root word over there is aleph resh chaf, so that's arach, which means to lengthen or to stretch. Okay, when we say, like, for example, arichut yamim, we wish somebody long life, so erech means long. So again, Yesh Rasha Ma'arich Barato, there are wicked people who are able to take that same moment and stretch it out and use it to their advantage. So he says, look at this righteous person who is totally correct. They're the righteous, they're right in everything that they say. But unfortunately, they have and again, building off that last verse where we have the right moment to speak and the right moment to be silent. You've got the righteous person who not realizing when it's the right moment to speak and right moment to be silent, shoots off their mouth when it's not appropriate. And because of that, they end up losing people's attention. They lose people's interest, and they lose themselves in that process. Okay, the great example, I mean, the extreme example of this is a guy standing on a soapbox on a street corner. The end is near, or anything like that. Even if they're right, they got the wrong path to expressing their views. And as opposed to the wicked person who may take that same moment and figure out how to use it to their advantage, which is very unfortunate. I think there's a second meeting over here, but we are at time. So we will pick up here next time.